So good afternoon and welcome to MaiaGrazing's March panel discussion. My name is Sarah Schmuder. I work on natural capital projects for Impact Ag, based here in Armidale, Northern New South Wales, Australia. I mention Australia because we have about 340 participants today, or attendees, from Australia, the US, Argentina, Bolivia, and Germany. So quite a range right there. I just thought I'd start with saying that I've got a particular passion for normalizing conversations around regenerative agriculture. And I started a group 2 years ago called the Regenerative Agriculture Group on Facebook. And we've got about 20,000 members now, which is extraordinary. And a great diversity of people. So people from all sorts of agricultural initiatives around the world. So many times I hear different conversations in this forum, talking about profitability and what's the pathway to it through regenerative agricultural practices. So today I welcome three great fellows from different backgrounds. We have a farmer, a butcher, and a processor. So our farmer, Sam Trefue from Tasmanian Agricultural Company. And we have the butcher, Grant Hilliard from Feather and Bone, based down in Sydney. And the processor, Chris Belraj from Provenir. And Chris, look.
Close.
Oh, didn't I get it?
That was close.
Belraj from Provenir. So Chris's byline is "Love your meat," and I just think everyone can identify with that, being a grazing group. So we've got 45 minutes today to have a discussion, quite a meaty discussion, can I say? And I thought we'd start with the panelists introducing themselves and then moving into more of a conversational format. I invite our attendees to submit any questions. So at the end, we'll have a Q&A for about 5 to 10 minutes. So I thought we'd start with Sam, kick off with Sam, if you can give us a why and a what for.
Sure, thanks. Thanks very much. I'm Sam Trefue, and my wife Steph and I run a business in Tasmania, which is most would know, but it's a little island at the bottom of mainland Australia. We run a regenerative, vertically integrated beef business. So we grow out our animals using regenerative principles on a couple of farms, and then we, follow those animals all the way through the supply chain, and actually launched 3 weeks ago. We're in market, selling our product and selling our meat. We weren't handed a family farm or a farm, so we have had to raise a significant amount of capital for both the property side of our structure and the working kind of capital, the actual operating company side. So that's been a pretty big part of what we've done the last 3 years. But we've only been in market 3 weeks rather, and yet to send our first invoice. But I'm going to be doing it this week because we haven't had any revenue in over 18 months. So I'm pretty excited about that. And just lastly, I suppose, I've been using regenerative principles on and off throughout my life. I've worked for a lot of kind of traditional, conventional guys. I've worked in different agricultural businesses all over Australia and some overseas. So I've had a fairly good taste at it all. And I suppose, decided a couple of years ago to kind of go all in. And if we're going to create some kind of worldwide change, this needed boots in the ground. So we sold up and then bought up, and here we are.
That's great. Thank you, Sam. And off to our butcher, Grant, if you could give us your why and what for.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Hello to everybody. My name's Grant Hilliard from Feather and Bone. We've been going for about 15 years. We set up, my background is restaurants really. And I was a wine buyer in restaurants working in the front of house, but sourcing wine led me to sort of expand on that really, and visiting vineyards is a very sort of telling way of understanding the agricultural practice of those places. I just really took the same attitude to meat, and at the time probably provenance in meat wasn't really being foregrounded at all. you could sort of find if it was organic or maybe milk fed. They were the descriptor, the sort of as much descriptors as would be normally attached to it. What I was really interested in was being as specific about the meat that we were sourcing as the wine that we bought, and that we would be able to tell those same stories that we told about wine, which is a very sort of story-based industry, and that they've been very good at telling, you know, very elaborate stories about themselves. And I can't see why that shouldn't apply to any other agricultural practice. So that was the beginning of the business, and I had no experience as a butcher at all. And so it was an extremely steep learning curve, because I thought I was just going to sell small whole animals and restaurants would deal with them themselves. But of course, then they say, well, actually, I can't really buy a whole lamb. Can I have half? And one thing led to another, and 15 years later, we now have quite a substantial butchery. We're a wholesaler and a retailer now, though. So we do service restaurants, but the biggest part of our business is retail, so selling to private customers. We do mail or deliveries around Sydney and further afield with third-party couriers, but we also have a lot of people coming to our workshop shop here, based within the production building, which is an industrial estate in inner city Sydney. So it's not glamorous by any means, but it is a very transparent process. And that's sort of, that was been the impetus, and we've just built on that ever since, really. A few things have guided that, though, which I should say. We were determined to only buy whole animals direct from farmers. We were determined to only buy produce that wasn't grown in sheds, so that it had to be pasture-based, and that the vast majority would be sourced locally. So 95% of what we buy comes from New South Wales. We do buy a tiny bit from Victoria, a tiny bit from Queensland, and just recently a tiny bit from Tasmania, but not yours yet, Sam, but maybe. And that was the first time we went that far. But so they're the sort of the outline for what we decide to buy, but we're very focused now on how people farm. We started with concentrating on rare breeds and really focusing on genetic diversity of livestock. And I suppose now it's broadened out to be a much more holistic understanding of the diversity within all the species that live on a farm, not just the livestock on.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Grant. And now Chris Ballage, who is down, I know, Bendigo way right now. Is that right, Chris?
A little bit further west than that. We're in Dunkeld, just at the base of the Grampians.
Well, if you could just give us an insight into your operations. I know you're a processor, however, you're a butcher and a farmer, so you have all the vertical integration happening. So if you could enlighten us on that.
Hi, I'm Chris Ballage. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Profitability, which is Australia's first and currently only mobile abattoir operating in Australia. So our value proposition is very simple. Instead of the animals going to the abattoir goes to the animals. For us to be able to do that, it took 5 founders to come together with pretty much nothing more than passion to make some impact to the red meat industry. A sexy Excel spreadsheet that said that we were going to make some money one day, and a whole lot of passion. And with that, we were able to raise significant capital, probably by now a bit over $2 million that we've raised through grants and equity sell. We have an operating mobile processing unit, which is, I've just stepped out of that today. And we're now selling the cattle that we process on the farm through to a number of restaurants, Rockpool, Three Blue Ducks, a number of other restaurant chains who like the provenance aspect of it. And we also sell through your 60 retail stores as well, Harris Farm and a number of IGAs as well. So for us to get there, we had to sort of get over quite a lot of hurdles, a lot of regulatory barriers. There definitely wasn't a straight path for us to be able to do that. But now we've been going for just on 18 months, and we're sort of sailing along very nicely and starting to think how we're going to build the subsequent units.
So lots going on. I've just wanted to raise that we've got people putting in where they're coming from all over the place. So hello, people from Sunshine Coast and Southeast Queensland. There's a message there to send me some questions for our Q&A session, but it'd be really great if people could just put in where they're coming from, and so we could get a good understanding of the scope of attendees today. So Lismore, Japan, Washington, Wagga. So it's great to hear. So keep them coming in. I come from the non-profit sector. So I've worked for Landcare for 15 years. So I'm just interested from our participants, if you could let me know what you think profit means to you, starting off with Sam, please.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I mean, to be honest, straight up, it's that, you know, income must exceed expenses, which is one of the simple and things that all business owners should focus on. Yet so many of us don't kind of get that right. But I suppose profit is a variance there, and for our business, it's incredibly important. I suppose more broadly, to kind of, which is probably what you're more after, is, you know, if we can create environmental benefit, economical benefit, and perhaps in turn and in time some political benefit, then if we're increasing and adding value to all of those things, you know, including our people. I mean, there's a long list, right, of all the things that we want to kind of evolve and grow throughout our business as it picks up and increases in size and scale. I think you know, that's probably the best definition for me, is the continual evolvement and improvement of all the resources and suppliers and everything that we have in our business.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Grant, have you got?
Yeah, well, I would echo, you know, a lot of what Sam's just said. It has to be thought of. I mean, there's the obvious sort of question about money in and money out. We started with $300 and have just sort of built from there. So there was never a great deal of money involved, and we haven't. There's been no capital injection into this business apart from what we've made in the business and ploughed back into it. But more broadly, you know, what we see ourselves, our real role now is as community creators, and by working with farmers who in turn are creating their own communities. We have a community of people that buy from us, and what we've sort of come to realize is that they provide connections between themselves. So we're sort of like a node, effectively, that connects farmers, we connect producers, we connect consumers, but I don't like to think of them that way. They're certainly not end users. I don't think there's any end users in what we're sort of about. What we're trying to do is create a cyclical sort of pattern of reward for all of those people that contact us. And we try and be as transparent as we can, meaning that the line of sight, to use Jonathan Safran-Foer's idea, is as clear as it can be back to the producer. And, you know, it's not about the sort of, we've never really claimed that we have quality meat, you know, and I think it's what we're interested in are the embedded qualities in that meat. And that's the decisions that have been made by the farmer, the genetics that have been employed, the method of farming, the soils that were involved, how much water was stored on the farm. And I think they're the challenges that that's the communication level that we have to get to, is where we value all of that. And so that is our true profit, that people come to realize that by buying meat like this, or it's not just meat, we happen to be focused on that today. It could be olive oil, it could be garlic, it could be any agricultural product, that we're investing in a whole range of other resources and profiting from them. And, you know, it's a very damaged food system. And I suppose that's why that's probably why we're all here today. We think that we can change it, and we feel like we have to change it. So the profit comes from people being able to access it. And if you can provide that service to people, then you've done your job.
Yeah, that's excellent. Chris, have you got something to add to that?
Yeah, for us, it comes back to our company mission, really, and vision. So we see profit on three levels. The first one is we have to be commercially profitable to give dividends back to our shareholders and those who have invested in the company to keep the business going. But beyond that, we have to provide a social profit. So, you know, the meat industry is a very tough game. It's got a lot of broken souls in there as well. So we actually see that we have a role in taking on people that we can hopefully grow in the business, and we see that as our social profit. And obviously, being a processor, we can choose where we select our cattle from. And I can tell you, we select regenerative farmed animals. It would be a lot more financially profitable if we just hooked into a feedlot and processed there in a feedlot, but we've got an environmental profit aspect as well. So we see that through regenerative farming, we can profit the environment by the carbon sequestration and the other aspects that we're going to talk about. So for us, it's the threefold. So it's commercial, social, and environmental.
Oops, thank you. I'm just getting off this. There's lots of questions coming in, lots of chat happening. Thank you for that. You've somewhat answered some of the next question, but you all model your businesses around the principles of regenerative ag. But I just wondered about your path to finding profitability personally. You know, I'm sure it's paved with lots of challenges, but Sam, you know, your path to finding profitability.
Yeah, I suppose, and if you use my latter definition of profitability, which we've all kind of talked to, which is more than just, you know, income exceeding the difference between income and expenses. How am I finding it? Bloody difficult, to be honest. Yeah, running very hard, running very fast, enormous amount of pressure, an enormous amount of animals, trying to do the right thing by investors, animals, land, people. Yeah, this is incredibly tough, and I often revert back to the many startup stories that I've been witness to, and those that are available in books and podcasts, to know that this is the hardest part of our business. We are in the valley of death. Our burn rate every month is quite a large 5-figure sum, and we haven't had any revenue for 18 months. But we want to be a large-scale regenerative food producer who can provide fantastic, clean, healthy eating meat into good markets consistently all the time. This is not a once a year type kind of supply piece, right? So, trying to balance our we've got some pretty big kind of land care type kind of plantation projects on, trying to revegetate a lot of what we're doing. We've got multi-species pastures going in over a number of different farms with different mixes for different things based on soils and carbon, there's just so many moving parts, and we've got some good people around us now, but never enough. So to answer your question, bloody difficult, but been getting there, and just trying to keep focusing on the must-haves, and hoping to God everything else falls into place. Chewing like what.
Well, I appreciate your honesty. It's the reality of this is that we need people to be aware. This process for them needs to be transparent, so they can appreciate the task ahead, and that can lead obviously to profitability. So Grant, for you, your pathway to finding, you've been in business for a number of years, so it's been a long one. Yeah,
it's been through many phases. I suppose because there wasn't a lot at risk initially, if I spent 300 and made 400, I felt like I was doing quite well. And it really was that simple. I mean, my inquiry was really specific to, certain breeds of sheep. And it really has ballooned from there. And initially, not many people were interested in what we had to do, what we were doing. There were certain restaurants that were very supportive at the beginning, and that made all the difference. And having, I suppose, an introduction to those people, for the early years kept us afloat. And also I was able to keep working in the restaurant where I was employed and sort of ease my way out of there. It went through a very sharp growth and then a very plateaued phase, because we then had to invest in infrastructure and refrigeration, freezers. They're not cheap things, cool rooms, delivery vans, and so everything sort of has got ploughed back into it. But we've been lucky in the sense that we've landed at a place that we managed to buy a place in Sydney at the right time that has become a good base for us, and that gives us the possibility to sort of, you know, we don't want to rule the world at all, but we do want to be able to provide as many outlets as we can comfortably handle from the growers that we work with. And that's a changing group of people. Some people supply every week, some people only supply once a year. But we try and apply the same sort of due diligence to their operation, irrespective of their size. You know, a lot of the drive, I think, is always, you know, butchers will say, well, if you can't supply me all year, I'm not interested. And I really sort of don't understand that. I think, you know, it either has its qualities that you're prepared to offer to your customers or it doesn't. But part of your job is to encourage people to give them the outlet and to encourage them to try what they can, and to feed back to them the information about from the people who are eating their meat or whatever product it might be that they're producing. It's always difficult because the commodity market is essentially set up in opposition to this, and you have to work against that all the time and the assumptions that are around that. So, you know, there's $8 rump out there. We don't sell it for $8, and you know, but there's $8 wine and there's $50 wine. You have to be able to provide the argument and the evidence that says that the cost of this is, you know, the full cost of this food is built into it when you buy it. You're not externalizing the costs like industrial production is allowed to do. So, you know, it's a long argument. Sometimes you access it through. The good thing about food is that everyone has to come to the table, and you can access it through aesthetics, you can access it through sharing, you can access it through taste. It is a great way of sort of disarming people to have a discussion that's a bit more deep about equity and you know, regenerative management.
A little bit later, we'll come into how you've educated those consumers. So that's a little bit deeper later on for those that are interested. Chris, what about your pathway? It's been dotted with lots of challenges as well, I can imagine.
Yeah, look, when we actually started this, the concept of on-farm processing was illegal in Victoria. And so we started petitioning politicians probably 5 or 6 years ago. And so, you know, we've come over some pretty significant hurdles just to exist. And we did change the law back in 2019, which was a really pleasing day for us. And, you know, the pathway, particularly when you're doing something that is new and hasn't been done. There's no textbook for this. There's no, you know, industry group that I can go and refer to, you know, Mobile Processors Alliance or something like that. You know, this is really 5 guys making it up as we go along. But the shared vision of the founders has been the thing that's actually kept us all together. And I think that the value proposition of what we provide is pretty much a no-brainer. It's pretty hard for someone to say, hey, no, I'd prefer my cattle to go on the back of a truck and spend 3 days to get processed. And you know, the industry struggles with traceability in large scale. So, you know, the provenance element often leaves at the farm gate, and that's where we can provide an alternative to it. So we've had tremendous support from farmers, from consumers, you know, food connoisseurs across the board. So, you know, we've had a lot of support, but, you know, it's a classic example of some of the hurdles that we had to go is when we were actually building the unit. We had to build it wider because it's a truck. It had to be 3 meters wide rather than 2.5 meters wide. So it needed to fit under the new national heavy vehicle regulations, which came in 6 months before we actually got the truck on the road, which despite the fact that it says it's national, all states with the exception of WA, complies to it. And guess where we got it built? Yeah, right. Yep, WA. So, you know, we had this hurdle that we couldn't even get the truck out of the state that we actually built it in because of the regulations from there. And we had to get special government dispensation from the minister to actually drive it out of the state. So we've managed to hit every single regulatory hurdle along the way. But as I say, you know, what doesn't kill you?
And you're definitely stronger for it. But it's
And
sort of, that I think you just covered one of my other questions, which was about the challenges you face. But can you think of another example that's been particularly challenging to make you stronger?
Yeah, so particularly with regards to the regulations, particularly the food regulations, they haven't been kind to us. They haven't been understanding. You know, they've had 30-year-old regulations, which isn't entirely appropriate for a static abattoir, but when you're mobile, there's a lot of issues that you don't have to worry about. So, you know, such as the inedible offal removal and so forth. You know, a large abattoir is dealing with, you know, literally hundreds of tons per day. That's a big issue. You know, we're on a farm for 1 week, we deal with 2 tons, which actually you can make really good regenerative compost out of it and put it back on the fields and start to get that circular economy. But, you know, the regulators won't let us because they've got that, you know, tunnel vision about what an abattoir is. So, you know, we've spent so much time writing to, you know, the EPA, food license, road regulations, NLIS. So, you know, it's a really cool idea, but it seems to trigger everybody's regulatory concerns, which is one of the challenges in Australia, is we're so heavily regulated.
Yeah, we're all very aware of that. Farmers, butchers, processors. So Sam, you would have come across some challenges too. Is there any one that was a particular difficult financial decision that you found? You know,
Yeah, most weeks. Most weeks. I mean, look, you know, we've had, you know, some of my first big decisions that had $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 kind of consequences were pretty huge. You know, like any decision, you can only, you know, get all the information and data and you know, go with a bit of gut and means test it by some people who are smarter than me and then kind of jump. But I suppose it's actually not. I suppose the question is I mean, the financial stuff's tough, of course, but it's actually making the decision. I think is the key that I want to quickly make here is, and that's perhaps, you know, from a personal, professional development point of view for me. And you've got to, you know, like I've got a decision that I've got to make this week, which is going to be kind of up there, over $250,000 decision, and I think that the question is not, do I make I've got to make the decision. I think that's the point. So I remember writing an article about this years ago that you either make a decision or you don't make a decision. But if you don't make a decision, that's a decision. And therefore you've got to deal with the consequences of that. So I think that's been the hardest thing for me. And actually I was just standing with my old man in the kitchen earlier on talking about it while he was down here. We've just got to make a decision and then deal with the consequences later. But if we don't make a decision, we'll continue to spiral into, you know, the abyss, and the consequences will be a lot greater than the shit fight that I'll have to deal with if it wasn't the right decision. So I suppose that's the big lessons. Make the decision.
We're going really well with time, so I just wanted to go back to Grant and just discuss just your educational tactics, pretty much, on how you reach those customers that are willing to pay that premium price as opposed to what they were paying the supermarket for your product.
Okay, well, in a sense, it's quite a simple story in that you're making no promises for it that can't be held. So it's actually quite a restful position to be in. Because you don't claim it to be the best, you're not actually trying to defend a position all the time. I'm happy to say this was a 3-year-old belted Galloway steer from this farm. We've aged it for 4 weeks, and I hope you enjoy it. And it's up to you to make a decision. Otherwise, you can say that was delicious or not. But if you get stuck in the idea of taste, it's a cul-de-sac, because everybody likes different things. All we can really do is provide the information about it. And it sounds a bit sort of raw and like it's being dumbed down, but it's not actually, because of course, to say that it's a 3-year-old belted Galloway steer from this farm then opens up a million questions for those who are interested. We attract people for different reasons, and we've got markets for different parts of what we do. And because we're whole animal butchers, we need that. And that was probably the biggest struggle at the beginning, was finding the different people to buy the different parts. It's pretty easy to sell prime cuts. All of us can sort of sell those. The question is, where's your audience for the fats? Where's your audience for all the organ meats? Where's your audience for the bones? And we've created that over time. And that's the real difference now, is that we have different audiences for different parts of what we sell. And they come for all sorts of reasons. And, it isn't all high end. Boned, marinated rolled lamb breast is like $22 a kilo. I defy anyone to say that A-class protein for a kilo is not good value at $22. It's 4 coffees. It's ridiculously cheap, in fact. And if you want to eat fillet every day, yes, it's going to be expensive, but the argument is, why should you? 1.4% of the body weight, it's just not reasonable that you consider eating it more than 1.4% of the time. When you put it like that to people, they actually do start to grasp it. We have a big window in our shop which looks straight into the cool room, and it's a constant reminder what it means to eat meat. It is no small thing to kill something, as Chris will no doubt attest. It is a big, and when you're dealing with cattle, it is a big bloody thing, and people need to be constant, not rubbing their face in it, but you should never be divorced from the reality of what it is to kill anything. And that's where
I absolutely agree, Gary.
It's where you invest the process
Yes.
with dignity. It's the only way that you can do it and maintain it. And it's when you refuse to confront that you allow the abhorrent practices of the abattoirs to continue. And it's, we have to open these doors and make it visible. That's the way we get to anything. I find it really interesting, for those of us outside of Australia, but those of us in Australia, we're going through a debate at the moment about sexual assault, and the Australian of the Year is talking directly to people about that. And what she is saying is exactly the same thing. It's only by bringing this out, by shining the light on it, that you can have the discussion, that you confront the choices that you really have made. Not by default, by ignoring it, by actually engaging with the process. I bought this piece of meat, it came from this animal was killed this way, whether it went to Chris's place or it went to another abattoir, or increasingly on-farm abattoirs, as some of the producers that we work with have, not for beef, but pigs and chickens and birds. That's all really important. So, but equally, you soften that with, that tastes really good, doesn't it? And when you bought your family to eat it, what did they enjoy? My children only eat these sausages now because they don't like the other ones. Well, that's good to know. And, people coming in, it's really quite humbling to be able to, when people choose you to provide their food. And it's a great responsibility. But it's not just ours, it's the producers that we work with, and we share that responsibility. And we never take it lightly. And I think that's why our customers respond to the stories, because they understand that they actually mean something. They mean something to them. I come from a restaurant background, and what mostly happens in restaurants is that they're essentially trying to sell you something. What they misunderstand is that the action of being in the restaurant, you are nurturing them at a very deep level. And the idea of value, it could cost you $500. If they think that they've got $600 of value, they'll come back to you. It's all about the honesty that you provide it with, and the generosity of spirit that you bring to that, rather than just saying, how can I upgrade you to a bigger salad? You'll make more money off them now, but you won't keep them as customers. So for us, keeping regular customers and regular suppliers is absolutely key to what we do.
Chris, you have some interesting restaurants as your customer base. Blue Ducks, what is it? 3 Blue Ducks at Byron Bay and Rockpool, which is down in Melbourne and in Sydney. How are you going with? Are they expressing what Grant is just saying about that? You know, educating their customers and taking on that opportunity.
Yeah. So just in relation to the point that Grant said, that he has, you know, the window from the shop into the hanging room to see, you know, this Scotch fillet actually came from an animal. We have a similar concept that in our butchery, we have a window that looks out onto a farm, and that's where my cattle are as well. So, you know, for our butchers, there's this continual connection that they are processing what was a living animal. And we have a very strict process on the mobile processing unit. Whenever we load an animal to be processed into the back of it, there is no talking. There's just dead silence. And that's out of respect for the animal that we are going to process from there. So anyone who's talking or any machinery that's occurring stops automatically. And that's a bit of a ritual for us. It's very good for keeping the animal calm, which is one of our key attributes that we're doing. But it also continually reminds all the staff that there is that moment of reflection when we actually take the animal's life for consumption from there. So we're pretty strict about that, and that's sort of what we believe in from there. And when we tell that story to people like Mark from 3 Blue Ducks and Neil from Rockpool and so forth, they get it. And we've had a number of people come out onto the unit to have a look at how it's done. And we're very proud to say that with the tea, every person has gone away impressed with the way that it's done and the respect that it's done. And for that, as Grant was highlighting and what Sam does every day, is you get amazing quality meat coming back because you've been able to capture that animal that has been grown and harvested at the point of production. So, you know, that's the story that we're starting to get out. A lot of people don't want to know about it. You know, there's a lot of people who say, you know, I love to look at the cow in the paddock, and then I like to look at my piece of steak on the plate, and I don't want to know anything about the middle of it. I think, you know, processors have got a role and a responsibility to have that transparency with the consumers for them to make active decisions about the protein that they eat and where they get it from.
That is, yeah, thank you for elaborating on that. That really feels the, you know, everyone being more informed about that process. Sam, I have a question for you just about your business journey and you know, who your greatest supporters were and what sort of tools and services you use to accelerate to your goals.
That's an enormous question, and I'll keep it as...
We just need to keep it down just to...
Yeah. So I suppose to be completely upfront, I would argue the regenerative journey is an exciting one. You know, we're all here talking about it. You know, I always say that agriculture is overdue for disruption. We've been farming the same way now for about 70 odd years, and we're due for an overhaul. And mark my words, regenerative agriculture is that. It's a wave, it's coming. Yes, you know, we're all kind of out there doing our thing, innovating, trying to kind of get used to it. I really believe in 5 or 10 years, it'll be commonplace, and we're going to see more and more demand and more markets for this type of stuff get up and going. And it'll end up becoming commoditized in its own way, but we're hoping it ends up being commoditized in a way that provides a lot more respect and margin and you know, benefits to all those elements of profitability that we spoke about earlier. the business journey's been pretty tough, because the reality is that if I want fertilizer, or I need agronomist support, or I need to spray something or kill something or whatever on my farm, I've got a whole raft of support within 20 minutes of my farm from 3 of the biggest companies in the world that I can call. I can get stuff here very, very quickly to do those things. I can't really do any of that when I'm farming the way I'm farming. And I said to some guys the other week, I've had to go back to year 10 science, buy a microscope sometimes, and actually test some of the stuff that I can brew up to see if it's actually got living in there, what I'm trying to get out of my paddock, right? So there is a line, and it's a lonely road, right? So, but it's a ground up movement. The conventional agriculture scene was a top down approach, and this is very much a global grassroots ground up movement. And with that, and with social media and connectivity and platforms like this, we're seeing producers band together, help and support each other, because you can't get that kind of locally in the kind of usual paid kind of systematized form. So I use from we've got some great investor business mentors that we use from the way we structure our business. The way we go into our market, we've got some great people around us that have spent their whole life in top end beef markets, sheep, lamb kind of markets. They kind of help us there. So I think it was Kerry Packer said, hire someone who's smarter than you, or whatever it was. We try and do that everywhere we can. As far as tools on farm, I mean, MaiaGrazing's been a huge help for us. We're still kind of getting it set up. It's a bit of a beast. I suppose our business is incredibly different to a usual commodity farm that either trades cattle or just breeds and fattens. We've got a lot more moving parts and complexities with our business. So Maia handles that quite well, but it just means it's a lot more work and grind from us and the amazing support team at Maia that help us. So I suppose there's some of a couple of tools we use. Coming from a tech background like I have, working with startups, not developing it, full disclosure, anything that I can automate, I automate. And I suppose to my point on that is we're building data around as much of what we're doing as possible. If we're going to get this picked up and taken commercially, and investors are going to invest in this, they're only going to do that if there's awesome environmental data, production data, and commercial data. And so that's what we're trying to do, is build everything from blood tests all the way through to, return on assets, return, and all those financial ratios that come with that. So I don't know if I've really kind of answered your question, other than to say, I mean, there's some tech out there I still think is a complete waste of time, and it's a nice to have. I'm pretty harsh on that stuff, and feel as though I can be, given we've invested in the space for quite some time. Yeah, people and any automated tools that you can get to take jobs off the farmer, right?
That's great. Thanks, Sam. We've had a number of questions, and I'm seeing that there are answers. They're very big questions, so I'm not sure we've got the space here to talk at depth about those. I just thought, lastly, we've only got a couple of minutes to wrap up, but just to Chris and Grant, do you have any tips, specific tips, just 3 or 4 tips you've got for farmers that are looking to work with how they can grow their business with you? So, Grant, you want to kick off?
Well, one of the key questions that we get inquiries probably, I don't know, between 5 and 10 a week from potential growers that are either wanting to start growing or have a product that they're already growing that they want to supply. And one of the key questions, the first questions I ask them is, how far away is your nearest abattoir? Which Chris will appreciate. Because, if you're doing especially smaller animals, the whole idea that you might spend a full day traveling to the abattoir and back on a regular basis, can you factor that into your week? Because often the place they've gone to is wonderfully beautiful, but it's also wonderfully remote. And access, especially with fresh products, or fruit and vegetables, this applies to as well. How do you access your market? And, if it's not us, who is it going to be? And I think for farmers, it's very difficult often to imagine that connection. So, finding something that is unique as well is obviously that we can market in a particular way. And that might be the breed you're working with. It might be the way you grow them. It might be where you are. It might be the name of your farm. All things that can contribute to the story we want to tell about what you do. But if you are not passionate about your story, you can't expect anyone else to be. And not that I think that lack of passion is the problem with agriculture. I just think most people have been essentially run over by industrial agriculture and figuring out a way to put their heads above the ground. I sort of go back to what Sam was talking about. The networks are crucial. The communication networks that we set up, it's just like a healthy ecosystem under the ground. It is information transfer. The net has done an enormous service to being able to connect disparate growers working in far-flung areas, and that certainly applies in Australia. There is not one grower that we've worked with, and that's maybe 80 to 100 now over the time, that has had an immediate neighbour that grows or wants to grow like they do. And I find that pretty sobering, especially when they see the yields that farmer is getting, and how they handle extreme conditions like 3 years of drought. They've still got standing grass. It might be browned off, but they've still got standing grass and they've got nothing in their paddock. And I can't believe that they can look at that and still think that it's not a viable thing, but apparently they can. So being able for that farmer that does want to farm like that to be able to access people like the groups that you set up, and obviously MaiaGrazing provides a network as well. But it's a network that starts in the field and continues through to the city, through to your customer, and comes back to you. And that's the crucial thing, that it cycles. It isn't just a one-way ticket. And I think that's the problem with industrial agriculture. You don't hear anything back. And increasingly, the farmers that work within those systems are isolated themselves. So they're taken. So it's great to take jobs away from farmers, but when you depopulate rural areas, you also isolate them. And we know that farmers commit suicide at an enormous rate that is of a huge concern. And I think that's one of the untold problems of industrial agriculture. It's isolated those people. Chris.
I encourage, I'll put over to Chris for a sec, but I just encourage anyone. I'm deep into The Ethical Omnivore, which is Grant and his lovely wife Laura have written, and it speaks volumes of all their producers. So anyone that's interested in getting involved and reflecting the great works that are of some of those producers, it's available. The Ethical Omnivore. So Chris, you've got some tips for us.
Yeah, so the Provenir, what we call digital provenance platform, is every piece of meat that we sell comes with a little QR code. When you use that on your smartphone, not only tells you about the cut of meat, recipes of how to do it, and sort of what percentage of the animal it constitutes, but it also tells the entire story of the farm as well. So I had a question there from Gordon, sort of talking about, are people prepared to pay a premium for this? Absolutely. People are prepared to pay for a story. They want to know, meat is very expensive. So the difference between like $20 and $22, is a 10% premium. You can feel good about that. That's really powerful. And I would say to the farmers sort of looking at potentially partnering with Provenir or in that regenerative farming, you've got to have your marketing hat on as well. You've got to be ready to tell the story of your farm, why you farm, because consumers in the city want to know that story. Restaurants want to know that story. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend to people. Have a think about what your marketing plan is for your farm.
And to innovate. I mean, that's a great idea, using the QR code. Everyone's pretty adept at that now. So it's a smart progression. Yeah, that's all we've got time for. So I just wanted to thank you all, particularly these three great fellows, Chris, Sam, and Grant. Just fascinating listening to your story. So relevant and
Thank you, Sarah.
Also, to MaiaGrazing, thank you very much for hosting these panels and these discussions, because they're normalizing the conversation, which is what we're all involved in, is just building the community around regenerative agriculture practices and principles. Maia, I just want to mention, I've got a field day at Wilmot up at Ebor. It's a 2-day event on April the 8th and 9th. I've been to the last two events, so if you can make it, they are outstanding. They have a great array of speakers from all over the world, and it's about building community again, and it's networking. So I thrive in those environments. So I think, yeah, just to mention too, the people behind MaiaGrazing that make this happen is Sheeta and Dave. So a shout out to you guys. Thanks for putting this on today and making it happen. So I think that's a wrap, and we've made it by 12:50. If there are any of those attendees are interested in reaching out to Maia and just getting some answers to some of those questions, feel free, go to the Maia website. There's all the recordings from the past forums and these panel discussions. So lovely to meet you all, and take care.
Sarah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chris. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.